Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's Thursday, so it's time for a freight market update to see how the freight market has changed week over week. As always, we're going to look at the general overview where we look at capacity, what's going on with the volumes in the general as well as the spot market, what's going on with rates, rejection levels, and diesel prices, and then we'll go into specifics to see how the market has changed for dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds. And at the end of the video, as always, we'll talk about data versus experience. Ready? Let's go. Okay, so as always, we're going to start with the general overview and the charts are going to be attached right here. So general volume in the general market, not just the spot market, it actually increased week over week by 3.5%. Now, rejection levels decreased by almost 20%. They went from 6.2% last week to 4.99% this week. So that is not the greatest. Spot volumes have also increased by 6.43%, and spot rates have decreased by 3 cents per mile. So a lot of conflicting data. So now let's talk about the diesel prices. And we're going to start with the price at the pump. By the way, thank you to the person who said that I should show two maps, one with the price at the pump and the other one with IFTA considered. So first, price at the pump. As always, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi have the lowest price at the pump, below $3.20 per gallon. The highest prices are on the West Coast as well as in the East Coast. But let's take a look at the raw diesel prices and how the map changes. Not much changes, to be honest, but the lowest is actually Illinois. This is if we include IFTA into consideration, right? The highest is still Washington, Oregon, California, and the East Coast. Even though California has one of the craziest taxes, it's still one of the most expensive overall. So yeah, I hope that this map helps to figure out where you need to go or where you need to be to get those cheaper prices for diesel. Speaking of diesel prices, let's take a look at the general overview. This data is by AAA. So today, as of today, the average diesel price is $3.56 per gallon, which is about or almost 1 cent lower than this time last week, lower by almost 5 cents month over month, and lower by 45 cents almost year over year. So diesel prices are going down. All right, now let's talk about capacity. Unfortunately, I do not have that white line there to show you where the zero is, but yeah, capacity again increased. The net change at least increased. Yes, you can see that the line is going down, but that doesn't mean that capacity did not see an increase. It just means that the increase is less than last week, but the net change in carrier population in terms of MC numbers has actually increased 118 carriers. Last week, it was something like 181, if I remember correctly. If anyone knows why this is happening, please let me know. Perhaps it's the fact that we're coming close to the seasonal uptick historically in freight and people are trying to get in and grab an opportunity that unfortunately is not quite there yet. But yeah, if anyone knows why capacity is consistently increasing, let me know. All right, let's talk about data specific to equipment types. And we're going to start with those dry vans. So this is data I get by FTR Intel. I just put it into an easy to understand table. And this is for the week ending on April 25th. So it's about a week delayed, unfortunately. So the RPM, rate per mile, week over week went down by 1 cent. And currently the average for dry vans is $1.79, which is crazy. Year over year, rates went down 1.5%. But volumes week over week actually increased by almost 15%. That being said, if we compare it to this time last year, they're about 2% lower on the spot market. So now let's take a look at some maps starting with volumes. As you can see, it doesn't really change much, right? The most volume you will find for dry vans on the spot market, this data, by the way, is from Truckstop. I just put it into a map, is Texas, California, and Georgia, which all have over 1,000 loads. The least volume is the Northeast, as well as the Plain States and some of the West Coast. But if we take a look in general, and look at areas that are close to each other, the Midwest and the South is where the volume is at consistently. Now, what about capacity? Capacity tends to follow volume. As you can see, the lightest areas are also the Plain States, although more people go to Oregon, even though there's not as much volume there. And this is because that's just where the loads go, right? But in general, capacity sticks with the load volume. The question is, what is the load to truck ratio? Well, anything red is over capacity. There is less than a load per truck. Anything orange is equilibrium, 1 to 2 loads per truck. But something to keep in mind is this uses truck stop data, right? So this also depends on how many loads are posted and how many trucks are posted. Not everyone posts their truck, and sometimes brokers post one load multiple times. And the only place with under capacity, which is exactly 2 loads per truck, there's nothing that has over 2 loads per truck this week, is South Carolina. All right, now let's talk about those reefers. Well, reefers week over week also saw a decrease in the average rate per mile to $2.16. So it decreased by 2 cents per mile. Year over year, however, rates are about 1% higher on the spot market. Volumes increased by 3.7% week over week and are 7% higher than this time last year. Now, in terms of load volumes, most of the volume, which is 500 to 1,000 loads, is California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Almost no volume in the Plain States and actually some of the West Coast, especially in the Pacific Northwest, which is surprising for reefers. I don't remember it being this bad when we operated reefers. But again, if we take a step back and look at markets that are close together, most of the volume consistently is in the Midwest as well as the South. So what is going on with capacity? Well, capacity tends to stick also with the load volumes, just like for dry vans. And actually, it's true for any equipment types. People are not stupid. They know where the loads are at. They check before they go there, hopefully. But this map shows that they do check. So they go to places where there are loads. And in terms of the load to truck ratio, again, anything red is over capacity, anything orange is 1 to 2 loads per truck, and green here, Idaho, Delaware, West Virginia, Mississippi, is 2 to 6 loads per truck in the case of reefers. But again, be careful with equilibrium because it all depends on how many trucks are posted versus how many loads are posted. Last but not least, we have our flatbeds, which also saw a decrease in the average rate per mile on the spot market by 2 cents per mile. Rates year over year, however, are 5% higher. Volumes increased this week by 4.1% and are 24% higher than this time last year. Now, in terms of the loads, as always, most of the loads are in the South and in the Midwest. Let's take a look at capacity and then the load to truck ratio to figure out whether these areas are worth sticking to. Capacity tends to follow where the loads are, obviously. They are mostly in the Midwest and the South, as well as California. The load to truck ratio, however, as always, it's pretty much all red. I think it's a little bit better than last week, the map, but still pretty much all red, pretty much all over capacity. Let's take a look at the under capacity. There are quite a few areas this week. There are the green ones, and the under capacity for flatbeds ranges from 2 to 14 loads per truck. 14 loads per truck exists in Mississippi. It never changes. Mississippi constantly has the highest load to truck ratio. But a new one here is Oregon, which is quite interesting. Now let's go to data versus experience so that I can show you my experience in numbers. So data versus experience, to be quite honest, this week has been by no means easy. It has been a tough week. We have been able to get some decent loads, but it took a very long time. It took me on average about 3 to 4 hours to find a decent load, regardless of where we were at. Now, I made a system that I use every day and I will release it publicly. I'm not quite done with it. I'm perfecting it. There's going to be a lot in there, but I'm going to show you one small part of the system that I use to analyze my operations and figure out where to go. So these are our operations for the last week of April. And you can see it's divided by region. These are our rates with deadhead, and it shows you the region analysis. And one thing that is super clear is that the Southeast and the Midwest are the better areas. The Southwest is actually an outlier. We ran a couple of very, very short loads there, but the Southwest is usually not good for flatbeds. And the Northeast is the worst. And that's where I have one of my guys delivering to. So I'm very, very excited. But yeah, in general, it's the Southeast and Midwest that have the better rates. And this somewhat goes hand in hand with what truck stop data shows. The only issue with this data that I'm showing you right now is that it doesn't show you how long it took me to book each of these loads, and it takes a good while. How are you guys feeling about this week? Is it easier? Is it more difficult? Is it progressively getting worse? Or maybe it's getting better, or perhaps it's all over the place. For us, it has been getting more challenging for the past 2 weeks, and I'm really hoping that it's gonna get better soon. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.